Round 5 here at Grand Prix Los Angeles. TJ Rogers joined by Jake Van Lunen. It is Arilax on Black-Red Aggro up against Eric Froelich bringing Turbo Fog. This has been a deck that has been the talk of the town.
Yeah, and this is really kind of what we expected to see this weekend. This is the hallmark matchup of this weekend that we haven't gotten an opportunity to see yet. These Turbo Fog decks came out of players trying to find a way to punish the Black-Red Aggro deck. And the Black-Red Aggro decks have evolved in the last 2 weeks in order to try to beat this Turbo Fog deck. So now we're going to get to see why this Turbo Fog deck has been such a game changer, why it's blown this format wide open, and I'm excited to watch.
Yeah, I think the only exposure that we've had to it today was Brian Gottlieb earlier in the day, and beyond that, we haven't had a huge amount of exposure to it. So it's a Heart of Kiran coming down, and it's going to be Chart a Course from Eric Froelich. Draw 2 cards, discard a card. Does have raid on it, or functional raid, to where if you did attack, you would actually do not need to discard that card. So we're going to go ahead and just get rid of Glimmer of Genius, actually. I did see earlier a discussion. Brian Gottlieb was actually talking about this previously on a podcast about the discussion of Glimmer of Genius as opposed to Hieroglyphic Illumination, because the ability to cycle as that 1 mana option, or just always having to cast it for 4 for a card that goes much deeper.
Yeah, I think there's a there's a very reasonable argument to be made for both of those cards, and the correct number may actually be a split.
Goblin Chain Whirler comes down, deals that 1 damage, activates the Heart of Kiran, gets aggressive, and then we're going to see the same thing. Scrap Heap Scrounger comes down to the battlefield, crews up Heart of Kiran, attack with that, as well as the Goblin Chain Whirler. It's a hit for 7, and Eric Froelich down to 11 after gaining 3 life from this Gift of Paradise, which is why we are also seeing Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, enter the battlefield on turn 4, and we're going to be untapping that Forest as well as that Glacial Fortress. Actually 3 mana available because of that Gift of Paradise.
Yeah, and this is one of the great parts about the Turbo Fog deck. Because you get to untap 2 lands on the end of your turn when you +1 your Teferi, it means that you have mana to Fog, which will protect your Teferi, which will give you an additional card to refund you on that Fog that you played the turn before. And, you know, this is what the Turbo Fog deck is trying to set up. If Eric has at least 1 Fog in his hand, he's got to be feeling really good about this game right now.
We're going to crew up the Heart of Kiran, and we're going to attack directly at that Teferi, and it's Root Snare. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. That's the primary way that he's got damage coming in. You know, Lightning Strike is potentially an option. There's a Cut to Ribbon in hand, but that only hits creatures. And it's going to be right back to Eric Froelich, untapping with this 5 mana, and still has access to this Teferi of Hero of Dominaria because it did not take any damage whatsoever.
Yeah, and I mean, now he has access to this 5 mana here. He has not played a land yet. Then he's also going to get to untap lands on the following turn.
And, all right, it's Nexus of Fate. We are going to fire it down. Let's take an extra turn. That is going to shuffle itself back into the library. If it would go to the graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into the library. So that's going to be back in the deck to be drawn at another time. And we're going to be taking an extra turn. That's an extra activation of the Hero of Dominaria, as well as extra card draw, extra land drop.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what the Turbo Fog deck wants to be doing. When you have Nexus of Fate, you can actually use that that untapped 2 land ability to create additional mana, because Nexus of Fate is an instant, and things just start to get completely out of hand. Every single one of those extra turns represents additional cards with the Ferry, gets you closer to using that -8 ability, and essentially just locks things up in so many ways.
Karn's Temporal Sundering. Legendary sorcery. You can only cast it as long as you control a legendary creature or a planeswalker. Hero of Dominaria fulfilling that requirement, and taking a look to see the requirements. That is going to go back to the hand, and we are going to be taking yet another turn. We get that end step trigger to untap the lands. Not much to be done with it. And Eric Froelich heading into his 3rd turn right now in a row. And did he just draw Nexus of Fate?
I believe he did.
Oh, yes. And I think what he's doing right now, so he's going to activate this land that has the Gift of Paradise, because at the end step, if he does choose to do so, he'll have that untap ability, and then at the end step, he could cast this Nexus of Fate. Though it looks like he's going for the Karn instead, but because he'll be untapping 2 lands, that's going to give him an additional 3 mana.
So he still has Nexus of Fate mana.
So he has Nexus of Fate mana in the end step. That card being an instant is suddenly a massive boon. And Karn Scion of Urza alongside the Hero of Dominaria, we are getting it done.
Yeah. And now Teferi threatening to create an emblem.
Anytime that you draw a card, exile a permanent, that's going to eliminate all of Alex's board over time. And that's even if, we're going to go for it. The emblem is now going to enter the scene. They were ready for it.
Oh, yeah.
They knew that was coming. Is that Search for Azcanta as well as, looks like a cycle in to me.
Yeah, so that Irrigated Farmland actually is a 2 mana exile target permanent draw card.
Wow.
So.
Of course we were willing to ult it. There's another Teferi in hand. Let's go for that. Let's go ahead and draw a card with that plus ability, exile the Goblin Chain Whirler, and now it's a Heart of Kirin and 4 lands against the world. Eric Froelich, looking calm, looking ready. He knows exactly what he's doing at this point. This is just about done.
Yeah, this one is looking over and done with.
Chart a course, draw 2 cards, then discard 1. All right, exile 2 things. We're down to 3 lands for Relax. This looks like a non-game for Ari. You know, there was a Goblin Chain Whirler. There was certainly some attacks. We were down to 11, but just draws the card, picks it up, couldn't find a way. That Nexus of Fate into Karn's Temporal Sundering into Nexus of Fate was just devastating.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what this deck does. This deck was specifically designed to take advantage of these mid-range aggro decks that were dominating the format. And, you know, over the course of the last couple of weeks, we've seen aggressive decks evolve their game plan in order to beat this Turbo Fog deck. We've seen red decks go down to 18 lands. We've seen them cut things that you never imagined them cutting from the deck just so they could beat this Turbo Fog deck. And, you know, things shifted back. People stopped playing as much Turbo Fog. Black-Red kind of became the best deck again. But somebody who's decided to play Turbo Fog this weekend, who's decided to be, you know, taking extra turns, to be casting Teferi, and who's going to come into this room playing against the best players in the world who are all, for the most part, on these weird mid-range decks, Eric's got to be feeling really good about his chances this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a clinic there in Game 1. And heading into Game 2, a lot of these red decks have been trying out Insult to Injury as a potential answer because it does say that damage can't be prevented this turn. Now, Arlex does not have any copies in the sideboard, so taking a look at it, what are you really thinking that the key cards for Arlex heading into Game 2 against this deck that really nullifies combat in a lot of ways?
Okay, so I think one of the very best cards against the Nexus of Fate deck is Sorcerer's Spyglass. And I think that's a card that a lot of people overlook as, you know, the potential game changer when they're playing against that deck. Playing a Spyglass and turning off Teferi changes how the deck plays drastically. And, you know, there we saw the power of having a turn 4 Teferi. Eric essentially won the game on the 4th turn.
Yes.
You know, honestly, it was a much later turn, but he had a lot more turns than Ari. But when he cast Teferi on the 4th turn, untapped 2 lands, and was able to root snare that attack, and then untap and just go off, that was all because of that Teferi. And if you're able to use Sorcerer's Spyglass and turn off Teferi, it's really hard for these Nexus of Fate decks to get the Spyglass off of the table. You know, their best answer for a Spyglass is a Teferi activation, which can't be used if you have a Spyglass naming Teferi on the battlefield. So I think that is by far Ari's best card for the matchup in his sideboard. He only has 1 copy of it. It's not a card that you want to draw in multiples, and Ari hates playing more than 1 of a card that you don't want to draw 2 of. So other cards in his sideboard that we'll likely see are Duress and potentially Doomfall.
And Doomfall because it could take a look at the hand, maybe take out a key card, but also because some of these Turbo Fog decks, and looking at just the construction of how Eric Froelich did his deck, sometimes they will bring in a couple of creatures, assuming that removal is going to be light, that everybody's going to be focused on the instant sorceries. They'll bring in a couple of Haymaker creatures. We've seen it in Lyra Dawnbringer. There's a Nezahal, Primal Tide in the sideboard here, and that Doomfall also becomes an option for some of those really difficult. Even Carnage Tyrant has been a popular choice.
Yeah, and I think that Eric postboard here, his most important card is Manglehorn. And that may seem odd. You may see a Manglehorn and think, oh, well, that card is for beating Storm decks. That card is for beating, different types of improvised decks. But Manglehorn is really good in this matchup because it not only deals with Heart of Kirin, which is one of the best ways to output damage for its mana ratio, but it also deals with potential cards like Sorcerer's Spyglass post-board.
Okay. So looking to see 2 copies of that one from Eric Froelich. Very much expecting to see that one come in, because even if there isn't Sorcerer's Spyglass, he's not aware of what RLX is going to be bringing in. But you can expect that, and even if not, Beaumont Couriers do exist, as do Heart of Kirin.
Yeah, and Beaumont Courier is really the best card in this matchup for Ari. We talked about this early in the morning. I think I've already mentioned it today, but in playing this standard format, I was having more success against the Fog decks when I was keeping hands that were just, like I would mulligan to 5 and keep 4 Mountains Beaumont Courier and do reasonably well. And I would keep hands that were, 3 lands, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, and I would never have a chance. So the variance between your hands that include Beaumont Courier versus hands that do not include Beaumont Courier when you're in a matchup like this is really drastic.
And just adding on to that, tell me, why is that? What is it about Beaumont Courier that really sets the tone?
Okay, so Beaumont Courier, it applies a little bit of pressure, but I think the major type of pressure that it is applying is the cards that it's going to draw you and the fact that you can refill your hand. One of the problems for the black-red deck is that when you're refilling your hand, you often, aren't getting the same type of reach that these more traditional mono-red decks are getting, but you still have, ways to unload, ways to hastily attack your opponent. And, with the combination of that and something like Duress post-board, when you draw a whole bunch of cards and you're able to, Duress and then play out a bunch of threats, hopefully taking a Fog out of your opponent's hand so you can make that lethal attack, it's just really, really important.
Yeah. Good way to put cut to ribbons in the graveyard, too, if they have no creatures. All right, so it looks like we are going to see a mulligan here from Eric Froelich on this Turbo Fog deck. That is going to be going down to 6. Ari Lax seems pretty content with the 7. That's also got to be a good sign. He is going to be on the play. He is also going to be with more cards in hand in this very aggressive, though this deck we often do see sideboard into slower or faster versions of itself. Are you expecting this deck to be in the much faster version? Yeah,
so Ari's sideboard doesn't really give him the ability to get much faster. But I expect him to make his deck as lean as possible. He wants to end this game. If he lets the game go on too long, Eric starts doing things that are far more powerful than anything Ari's deck could ever dream of doing.
We just saw it. Turn 4 was too late.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, Eric there had a pretty nice one.
Yes.
But for what it's worth, it wasn't even that crazy. Like, all he had was a Gift of Paradise, a Teferi, and a Root Snare. And from there on out, it was just elementary, right? He just had, those 3 cards are all he needed to essentially win on the 4th turn.
There it is, the turn 1 Beaumont Courier from Ari Lax does get in that damage. It is setting the tone, a second copy of that Beaumont Courier. Jake, you've got to be feeling thrilled for Ari right now.
Oh, yeah, Ari's got to love his position right now. And this is exactly what you want to be doing when you're playing against the Fog deck.
2 mana there for, it's going to be Chart Course for Eric Froelich. He's going to draw 2 cards, pitch a card. He does find himself a copy of Haze of Pollen. That is the cycle version of that Root Snare. It's 2 mana, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt. You can also cycle it if you choose. But Chart Course, we're going to be discarding just like last time, but this time, Glimmer of Genius. We're attacking once more. 3 cards underneath 1 Beaumont Courier, 2 cards under the other. Eric Froelich finds himself down to 15, and it's actually a pass of the turn.
And that's quite surprising to me. I mean, in reality, though, it's very likely that Ari, had these 2 cards, doesn't really have much else to play. We can probably expect something like a Chandra on the following turn, maybe a Rekindling Phoenix, though that's not a great card in the matchup.
I do see that Chandra at the back of the hand, and I saw quite a few mountains, and I wonder if Arilex had a very similar mentality to you, which is I have Beaumont Couriers. The rest of this hand is a lot less meaningful. As long as I have that ability to get the pressure early and then later refill my hand with as many cards as possible. Chandra is going to come down to the battlefield. Couple of options that has 2+ abilities. One of them exiles the top card of the library. You can either cast it or you can deal 2 damage. And it looks like we are going to go ahead and add red with the other plus ability and activate both Beaumont Couriers at the same time. It is a cost of it to discard your hand. So we saw both of those happen. Discards the cards that he had remaining and gets to draw all of those cards.
Yeah, so now Ari with a 7-card hand, a Chandra on 5. And this is why Beaumont Courier is so good in the matchup.
Though it is Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, coming down with 3 mana remaining, we know that there is one of these fog damage prevention effects in hand, but there aren't any creatures currently available. So now it's a matter of Arilax trying to piece together the way to actually get this 16 damage in before it's too late. Nexus of Fate, still a threat. You know, despite the fact that Eric looks like he's got 5 mana, at the end step, he can put together a plan to have that 7 mana together.
Yeah, I mean, Eric has the Gift of Paradise also, so yeah, as far as instant speed plays go, he's access to up to 8 mana.
And there is going to be that Doomfall, a card that you expected to come in, and I imagine it's got a couple of ways to play around it. He could pick either mode. He's going to take a look at the hand. Makes sense. So we see another copy of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. We see that Haze of Pollen. Looks like 2 lands. They are both irrigated farmlands and a Chart of Course. And that's going to be actually the take.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that one?
Well, now I feel pretty good about it.
Sorcerer Spyglass comes down, and using that emblem just to name, you won't be getting this emblem. I'm going to go ahead and name Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. That card is shut down, and it is now a Chandra dominating the battlefield, putting down a Beaumont Courier, a 3rd one, and attacking in.
And if you're looking for how you beat this Fog deck with the Black-Red deck, this is how you beat the Fog deck with the Black-Red deck. These are the cards you want to have. You want to have Sorcerer Spyglass. You want to have Beaumont Couriers.
And this just looks so incredible at the moment. Following up that game 1, you got to think most players would be pretty disheartened having that happen to them. You know, they put down a really aggressive board, they attack in for 7, they pass the turn, and then they lose. Manglehorn. Manglehorn comes in, you expected it to, and now we see it eliminates the Sorcerer Spyglass. Teferi gets to activate, and the game is right back in contention.
Yeah, suddenly Eric, looking pretty strong again. He needed to find an answer to that Spyglass. That Spyglass, was turning off not only that Teferi in play, but Eric has a backup Teferi in hand. So Ari had, really, locked things up in so many ways with that Spyglass, but the Manglehorn, just perfect answer.
We plus up the Chandra, exile the top card. That top card is Hazaret the Fervent. Right now, Arilax is deciding between either paying the 4 mana to cast it, or it will go to exile, deal 2 damage to Eric. It's an interesting debate. You either get the attacking creature, but against 4 open mana, and a known Haze of Pollen, or you get the 2 damage from that Chandra, and you get to maintain the idea that you might be able to ult this Chandra soon. Also worth noting, Arilax has got quite a few cards in hand.
Yeah, I think that the Hazaret's activated ability, it can be very important in this matchup. A lot of the time, the Fog deck likes to survive on a lower life total, and the Black-Red deck does not have as much reach as its other red counterparts, making it worse in this matchup.
And we're going to have Heart of Kiran enter the battlefield tapped. That is the 2nd ability of Manglehorn. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact. Also, artifacts your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. And it is going to be just a pass, leaving this Beaumont Courier and this Hazaret. Really just the Beaumont Courier is on defense for the Chandra right now.
And Eric showing no regard for anything. Cycling that Haze of Pollen. When his opponent has Heart of Kiran, Hazaret, and Beaumont Courier on the battlefield, he doesn't want a Fog. He has the Planeswalker on the battlefield. And
-1 Teferi to get rid of the Chandra. Deal with that another day. Play down the other. Put down the island. And we are just going to plus that one up. Untap. And now 5 mana available. After casting that Planeswalker, Arilax looks so positive that when that Sorcerer Spyglass came down, but only has one copy, will not be able to find another, and needs to come up with some kind of way to deal 15 damage through these Haze of Pollens and everything else that is in Eric Froehlich's hand. He's got a lot of tools right now.
Yeah, I mean, Ari's got to be a bit frustrated here. I mean, he had the tools that he needed to beat the Fog deck, and I mean, this is not a great matchup for him. The dominance of these black-red decks is really what led to Turbo Fog becoming so popular. But he had what he needed, and Eric found that Manglehorn, and things quickly started to fall apart.
Yeah, I mean, just watching that Sportster Spyglass deteriorate was very much a breaking point for Arilax's game plan, and now we see him just trying to come together with, how do I win this game? You know, how can I put myself into a winning position? What do I need to prioritize? What do I need to play towards? There's the option of using this Hazaret the Fervent, the activated ability. It is 3 mana. You discard a card. You deal 2 damage to each opponent. Only has 1. And that's another way to get some reach over. But even with this being a really significant swing, there is the consideration that there are plenty of those abilities that will just negate all the damage. And you also need to be concerned about the recent inclusion in quite a few of these Turbo Fog decks, which is, you know, about 1 to 2 Settle the Wreckage as sort of the Fog's number potential 9 and 10. Like that one right there. Settle the Wreckage comes down, and suddenly it is just backbreaking for Arilax.
Yeah, Eric, you know, if we're including the Settle the Wreckages as Fogs, playing 9 Fogs here.
So now it is just the Chain Whirler and the Hazaret, though the Hazaret is now able to attack and block because we did activate that Boma Courier, and we're left with just an Ether Hub in hand. Though there is 3 mana, can just throw that. There will be the potential for that card to get aggressive. Quite a few of those basic mountains available now, and Eric Froehlich's going to be heading into his turn just over the moon. He's got mana, he's got Manglehorn, he's got Teferi. He just eliminated a very nice chunk of that board.
I believe he even has a negate for the follow-up Chandra.
Really?
And he may be thinking to himself that he has the negate for a potential second Sorcerer Spyglass. But we know that Ari only has 1 copy in his board.
And that's going to be the card from that Boma Courier that ends up getting exiled. I think that was in response to that trigger, going for that Settle the Wreckage. So it's going to be a 4 mana. No, we're going to do this in response. This was at the end step. We fired down the Nexus of Fate. We plussed up the Teferi, tap some mana in response to the ability to untap 2 lands, generate another 3, which is why you only see a few lands tapped right now. But because that 1 land was able to generate 4 mana towards it, and another one was able to generate 2, that Nexus of Fate being an instant means that you can get such a mana advantage using Teferi. Those two go together beautifully.
Yeah. Like
peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah. I was trying to think of like a really good example, and that was the best one.
Like TJ and JVL.
Yes.
There we
go. Exactly. I love it.
Initials. All right, so it is back to Arilax. Can we piece together a win with this Hazaret, with this Chain Whirler, with these 2 cards in hand? Is there 12 damage somewhere in here that does not get blanked by the formidable cards of Eric Froehlich? Let's get aggressive and attack the Teferi. Throw a block in front of the Hazaret, and it's just going to be a nice hit for 3. Teferi goes down, and it is going to be Chandra taken out by that negate that you spotted earlier. Off to Eric Froehlich it goes, untapping once more. And at this point, if you're Eric Froehlich, what are you looking for to really seal the deal?
Well, I think Eric has gotten flooded. He's got a lot of lands in his hand.
Is this maybe a chance for Arilax to actually come back in this game? We're going to get to see with a duress.
I think so.
Arilax is going to take a look. He's going to get to take any non-creature, non-land out of this. And depending on what we see in this hand, there's very much the potential for Arilax to jump back into this one after some of those just devastating plays. Haze of Pollen, casting that one to prevent some damage, and you're going to take the Teferi, which there's only the 2 lands left. I think he drew a land for the turn, too.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean, that he was really hoping to lean on that backup Teferi there, kind of use it as an...
Oh, it was Nexus of Fate. He's
That's
able
a good
to take...
draw step.
He's got another 2 shots drawing cards because he's got his draw step as well as this Teferi. Nexus of Fate being a perfect card to just buy him more time.
Yeah, and notice how he cast Nexus of Fate before plussing his Teferi, thereby increasing the chances in which that he would draw an additional Nexus of Fate, because Nexus of Fate, when you cast it, shuffles it back into your library. So really good sequencing there from Eric Froelich.
So now because instead of having 3 copies, he's backed up to 4 copies, the odds are increasing, and now he's I guess that means he's really got 3 shots at this once more. It's just going to be a pass back to Teferi at 6. Let's get aggressive once more, pointing them at that Teferi. We found ourselves another Haze of Pollen.
Which is basically a Nexus of Fate, right? At
basically,
this stage of the game, yeah.
It means that you get to untap your lands once more. You get to draw another 2 cards with that as well as the Teferi. I think functionally they are about the same card right now.
Yeah, and your opponent gets to draw their card for the turn. So.
Chart, of course, coming down for Eric Froelich. He's digging through this library. Cycling a land. Cycling a land.
Yeah.
How many cards? Man, if he had an emblem right this turn, he would have been living good. And it looks like we are actually going to activate the Hazaret to put this Scrap Heap Scrounger, discard it, deal 2 damage, and then paying the 2 mana to exile this Beaumont Courier to put it into play. So a 5 mana play to functionally put in this Scrap Heap Scrounger at instant speed and deal 2 damage.
Yeah, some nice plays here from Ari, too.
Hazaret and Chainwhooler are pointing at this Teferi. Hero of Dominaria, the Scrap Heap Scrounger going face. We're going to lose that one. A huge amount of the card draw that Eric Froelich had available to him, and I think he just drew Nexus of Fate.
Yeah, Eric cannot be thrilled here.
That's a redraw, basically.
Yeah, the Teferi was super important to his game plan. Now, in order to get back into this game, he may have to do something like chain a Teferi into something. And
he's just going to pick him up. Too much damage. Ari Lax comes away with that game after losing the Sorcerer's Spyglass, after having a decent chunk of his board taken away by Settle the Wreckage. Things look bleak. And a series of really nice plays from Ari Lax and holding on to what he could as far as a strategy, as far as maintaining some level of aggression. And Eric Froelich coming up with very little to actually defend what he had built means a win, and we're heading into a game 3.
Yeah, and Ari there, hats off to him. I think that a lot of people would have been tempted when they had their back against the wall and they're up against that Teferi. They just gotten Manglehorned to just throw everything in the red zone over and over again. But his careful patience, his ability to not attack with the Hazaret on that 1 key turn, thus playing around that Settle the Wreckage that Eric had, that Hazaret sticking around ended up winning him the game. And, sometimes you hearken back to a play that happened in the middle of, the doldrums of a game, and that's what wins or loses a particular game for somebody. But Ari there, he had all the tools he needed to win the game and was able to navigate it perfectly. Eric drew what he needed to get back into the game, and then just drew a few too many lands, and Ari played well enough to take advantage of that.
Yeah, being able to come away from that Settle the Wreckage with both a Goblin Chainwhooler as well as a Hazaret was enormous, especially after activating that Beaumont Courier where the Hazaret was once again an actual threat to attack. So heading into game 3, we've now seen both of these decks really put on a show of what they wanted to do. Ari Lax maybe in a 2-step process. He would have preferred that 1-step process with the Sorcerer's Spyglass. How do you feel heading into this one? Red-black aggro, you said this was not a matchup that they wanted to see.
I feel like Eric's still got to like his chances. He gets to be on the play here in the 3rd game. This is one of the reasons why you're playing this deck. Red-black is the best deck in Standard.
Sure.
I think after the Pro Tour, we can say with some level of certainty that the best players in the world tackled this format, and they did it for a long period of time. People before the most recent Pro Tour were, holed up for some of them multiple weeks at a time trying to figure out what the best thing they could be doing was. And the vast majority of the very best players in the world came out of their holes with a black-red deck in their hand. And that says a lot for the power level of this deck. But the Turbo Fog deck is a deck that is specifically trying to punish players for being on this, for being on these more mid-range style attacking decks that don't have as much reach as their more traditional red counterparts.
Looks like they're heading into their opening 7 here. They're going to get to decide. We did see that mulligan from Eric Froelich in Game 2, though I don't know how much of an effect that played because he did have a really solid opening.
Yeah, well, I mean, had he not mulliganed, that Nexus of Fate would have been in his hand on that last turn instead of the...
Naturally.
Well, he would have been 1 card deeper. So remember, he drew the Nexus of Fate right after the Fairy died? So had he not mulliganed, I mean, he almost certainly would have won, right?
I'm not really certain if I'm not certain if I agree with your math, Jake, but...
well, I mean, he would have been 1 card deeper, right? Isn't that...
It seems to, I don't know. I'm going to have to take your word for it. You're better at this game than I am. I'm going to have to say that sounds factual. So it's a duress following up a Beaumont Courier, and we see Settle the Wreckage, Teferi, Haze of Pollen, negate. That's quite a hand.
Yeah, that's looking pretty nice.
Willing to take one of these Teferis, and it is going to be another Beaumont Courier throwing some cards down, face down underneath these Beaumont Couriers. Every time they attack, they do that. They're a mystery.
Yeah, and Ari here, he has double Beaumont Courier again. So we talked about how this was his, most important card to have in his opening hand, and again, 2 of it.
It's putting on a show.
Yeah, it's exactly what he needs.
I think I see both a Chandra and an Angrath the Flame Chained in hand for Arilax right now as well, which means that if we can get up to 4 mana to, well, I guess if you get the Chandra, then you have the mana for Angrath. Those are some pretty good Planeswalkers.
Oh, yeah.
So Beaumont Couriers turning sideways. We do know about some of the options in this hand. There is a Settle the Wreckage in there. Arilax doesn't. He's not worried about it. He's going to attack anyway.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage of the game, getting settled would be something that Ari wouldn't mind at all, especially considering he has cards like Angrath in hand. Getting Settle the Wreckage would mean that he would have the mana to start deploying those much sooner. You really want to use a card like Settle the Wreckage once your opponent doesn't really need any more lands. So when you're playing against this red deck, you want to start casting a card like Settle the Wreckage once they're already on 4 or 5.
Pianalar going to join the battlefield as well. It's a 2/2 for 3, but it brings along a friend, that Thopter taking to the skies. And Pia's got a little bit of versatility with those artifacts as well. Can pay 1 mana, sacrifice one of them, falter a creature. It can no longer block this turn. Also, you can pay 2 mana to give one of those artifact creatures +1/+0 until end of turn. So she adds a little bit of firepower to those other creatures.
Yeah, a card with a lot of play to it. The fact that Pia can pump the Beaumont Couriers is surprisingly relevant in this deck. Comes up quite a bit.
Looks like we're debating how we want to go about this turn. Eric Froelich still on that 4 mana, still having a little bit of an issue, and we're actually going to leave back one of these Beaumont Couriers. So now both of them will have 4 cards underneath them, exiled face down. We're going to cycle this Haze of Pollen. We're looking for a land, and I think we just found it. So Eric's going to make his draw for the turn after that cycle. Now we've got a few of these lands. He's looking much more solid, and he does have that Teferi here of Dominaria, so this could be a big turn for him. He does not have that Gift of Paradise, so he doesn't have that 3 mana that he consistently has, but 2 mana is still enough to fire down a Haze of Pollen, still enough to throw down a Root Snare if he feels the need. And that 2 mana for Eric Froelich could be very, very relevant this turn because the amount of damage on the opposing side of the field is a lot.
I think Eric absolutely needs to have a card like Haze of Pollen here.
With Pianalar's ability, and there's going to be a duress here from Arilax, so he's going to get to take a look, and he'll still have And there it is, the Haze of Pollen. And we see Nexus of Fate. Now, that would shuffle in if Arilax decided to take that. I also do see the Negate, the Settle the Wreckage, and one other card that looks a lot like Settle the Wreckage to me.
I believe it is a pair of Settle the Wreckages, Negate, and Nexus of Fate.
It's so interesting. When you look at cards long enough that you start to recognize them by about 5% of their art on the left side. Like, I recognize that crossbar. That's
yeah, I could see the wreckage. It's settled into place.
Yeah, most of the wreckage is on the left side of the card anyway. It makes it really simple. Nexus of the Fate is going to get taken by Arilax, and it is going to be shuffled back into the library, leaving no evidence that it was ever there to begin with. Which sounds a lot spookier than I intended. It's mysterious now. Not a whole lot of point to attacking this turn. There is still that Haze of Pollen shield up for Eric Froelich. He fired that one down before the duress, so it's just going to be a pass back. I think that was a Charter Course as the draw for the turn, activating that Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. And I think that was a Sun Petal Grove. It's going to be Charter Course, draw 2 cards, then discard a card, attacking. Not something that Eric's been in the business of for quite some time now. So that discard, pretty frequent for him.
And it looks like he did find another copy of Nexus of Fate. He won't have the mana to fire it off this turn. Even after he plays a land, he'll be 1 shy. But after he untaps his 2 lands, he will be able to pass the turn, not only with Settle the Wreckage mana open, but also with a Negate. And things are looking real nice for Eric Froelich right now.
That's a great point. And knowing that he has got 2 copies of that Settle the Wreckage means that he can be a little bit more willing to fire one down, though. We are going to go for a huge Bohemot Courier activation here. Same thing as last time. Paying to activate them both means that you are going to pick up all 8 of those cards. We have accepted that against Settle the Wreckages, they're not going to get a whole lot better. Let's untap with 8 cards and get it done. We had not yet hit our 4th land, so that Angrath and that Chandra had lost some of their ability because now you're just behind, I imagine.
And Ari, trying to empty out his hand, he may be under the assumption that the best way to do that is to play Chandra and then plus it, producing mana. But he's up against the Negate. Oh, he knows about the Negate from duress, so he won't make that mistake. Ari's a smart gentleman.
Smart guy. He's 4-0. He's got a Pro Tour win.
Yeah.
He plays Magic pretty well.
He does. That's true.
So we're going to see this Pia Nalar and this Thopter showing some respect to the Settle the Wreckage that he is aware of. He does not want to become part of that wreckage on the left side of the card. And it looks like it is just going to be a nice, clean, easy root snare. It's going to be Chandra trying to just draw it out. If it's there, it's there. And this is actually going to resolve.
Yeah, and I like this a lot from Eric. Eric recognizing that he's at the stage of the game where as long as he can protect this Teferi, there is very little that can be done to stop him. So he wants to make sure that Teferi's not going to die to something like Sorcerer's Spyglass, that a piece of discard is not going to deal with Settle the Wreckage before he has an opportunity to cast it. Eric understanding what he needs to do and doing it well.
Nexus of Fate. Let's do it again.
Yeah, again, casting Nexus of Fate prior to using the +1 on Teferi to increase the odds of drawing an additional time walk effect with the draw there.
So what's Eric's answer to this Chandra going to be? He does have the ability of just minusing that Teferi.
Yeah, I think his plan now is simply to just tick up this Teferi repeatedly and kind of just ignore the Chandra.
Oh, maybe the 2 damage just is fairly inconsequential. You've got your 2 Settle the Wreckages, so anytime that Ari is attacking, you can just eliminate it that way.
Yeah, and remember, because of the way damage is dealt to Planeswalkers now, Chandra's +1 is no longer really that...
it cannot redirect to it.
Yeah, it can't pressure Planeswalkers in the way it used to be able to. So it's not really as relevant as it once might have been.
Yep, so now it's got to be either true burn spells like Lightning Strike, otherwise creature damage, and creature damage is going to be a lot to ask for at this point. Looks like we are going to untap. We are left with 6 mana. After all that fun, 2 copies of this Gift of Paradise is going to put Eric Froelich back up to 15. That Gift of Paradise, in addition to having the land tapped for 2 mana, it does gain 3 life when it enters the battlefield. So Eric's going to gain that 3. He's going to kick it back to Arilax.
Yeah, Eric currently has a Teferi on the battlefield that is threatening to create an emblem on the following turn.
So Thopters, Pianolars, Chandras, Heart of Kiran's, Chain Whirlers, a hand full of cards, among them more copies of Chain Whirler that would lightly pressure that Teferi.
Yeah, I mean, it would pressure the Teferi enough to prevent it from creating an emblem on the following turn unless Eric's able to find a Nexus of Fate.
He's been pretty good at that one so far. Nexus of Fate, it's when
the
you
deck's
keep
good at doing it.
when you've always got 4 copies in the deck, it's not that tall of an order. So it's going to be Settle the Wreckage. We're going to clear these ones out. We're going to find ourselves more copies of these basic mountains. Losing those ones. Not the highest price to pay, though. Eric's, he's still got another copy of it. Arilax was kept a couple of options in hand. He's going to lose that Heart of Kiran. Sure, he loses the Goblin Chain Whirler. But now he's got 5 mana, and he's up against only the 2 mana. We're going to plus that one up, deal another 2 damage with that mountain. Incidentally, my favorite mountain art.
That's good mountain art. It's good for good favor. Is that originally Mirage?
For it being my favorite, I actually can't answer that with 100% certainty.
Okay.
I really like that. That's just a mountain that when you look at it, anybody can look at that art and they think, yeah, that's a mountain.
It's true.
You know, you'd ask, what kind of card do you think this is? Mountain. You can put up on a wall, put on a card, whatever you want. Great card. Great art. All right, we've got that Teferi. It is back up to 8 counters, that Goblin Chain Whirler and that Scrap Heap Scrounger joining the fray. It's going to be more cycling here from Eric. He doesn't have that emblem just yet. Draws into Search for Azcanta. He does have 1 or 2 copies of Negate in hand. And it is going to be that Search for Azcanta. At the end step, we're going to untap 2 lands. It is 2 lands that have Gift of Paradise on them, which means that it's actually a 4 mana increase on the turn. At the end of all of this, 7 mana available for Eric Froelich.
Yeah, so again, passing the turn with access to Settle the Wreckage with Negate backup or multiple Negates if need be.
Chandra pluses, we find ourselves another copy of Goblin Chain Whirler. That Chandra, though, up to 7 loyalty counters.
Yeah, and now it's starting to be a little bit dangerous. Eric chose not to use the Negate earlier in the game, and he may end up getting punished for it. Although, for what it's worth, Eric does have this Search for Azcanta on the battlefield now, and that's going to allow him to get really, really deep in the library looking for additional copies of Nexus of Fate. And
we've talked in the past about just how phenomenal it can be to have Azcanta the Sunken Ruin and Teferi online. You can activate it, and then you can untap the Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, activate it again at the end step, and then take your extra turn if you've got the mana for that. Being able to find more copies of this is definitely on order. I'm curious if Eric feels confident enough, or if he just is going to put himself in the position where he doesn't need to answer the Chandra, because otherwise that Teferi minus is his primary way to answer that right now, and it is a bit of a setback because he doesn't get that mana advantage, he doesn't get that additional card draw. A lot of creatures on the battlefield for Arilax. We're going to transform this Azcanta immediately. 1 land away from being able to cast both a Nexus of Fate as well as activate the Azcanta without even the untap ability. And we're just going to go ahead and throw that one down right off the bat. And it's going to be Hazelpawn. Functionally, in a lot of ways, another copy of Nexus Fate. Just cost that 2 mana. You mentioned it earlier. When you're mostly worried about the damage, the main question at this point is that Chandra.
Yeah, Chandra and a potential emblem coming out of that Chandra are really the things that Eric is most worried about at this point.
Yep, and once that Chandra does have the emblem, it says anytime that you cast a spell, deal 5 damage to a target. And that is going to be 3 spells and Eric's out.
Yeah.
And in a deck like this, where there's a pretty decent amount of 1 mana, 2 mana, 3 mana spells, having 10 mana on Relax's side of the battlefield means that the cost of 3 spells is relatively attainable. It's going to be a backup copy of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. That one's going to come down, get rid of the Chandra, and I think that is going to be the solution for the time being. We are going to get to untap a couple of lands. This is down to a single counter, though really a Goblin Chain Whirler would answer that. Anything else, it's still going to be on the battlefield. It's still going to have that card draw available.
Yeah, Hazoret's activation, I think, is the... it's one way to... Oh, I guess, yeah, no. Yeah, he really needs Chain Whirler right now.
Yep. I think Hazard is also in each opponent.
Yeah, yeah, it's the rule change affected many cards.
Yep. So we're running through. We already know about the Haze of Pollen in hand, too.
Yeah.
That's got to be the most frustrating part of this, knowing that you have to attack it and knowing that it won't matter. You're going to get your card. You're going to try and force the spell. Knew that that was coming. I think there might be a Kari Zev in hand. It's going to be more of this creature-based game plan, and that's just not getting it done against this deck. 6 creatures available. Even the ability to pseudo Fire Breathe the Thopter or the Beaumont Courier, and all of that damage being brought to bear means nothing in the phase of some pollen. It's allergy season on the battlefield.
Oh, did Eric just take a Gift of Paradise over Nexus of Fate? Or maybe it was over a Negate. Must have been.
Probably over a Negate.
Yeah, I can't imagine that.
Blue shiny cards.
Yeah.
Gains 3 life, though.
Yeah.
And so it looks like we are now in the end step, and I think we're doing some spell casting at the end step. Oh, it's going to be another activation of this Search for Azcanta.
Oh, and now he can...
now he finds it. He's got the mana for it, so he's going to immediately cast it, looking at that Gift of Paradise. After that activation, still had the 7 mana required, so we got 2 Azcanta the Sunken Ruin activations and an additional turn out of it. Now he gets to untap and try to run it back, and he's going to have 10 looks.
Yeah, he gets to go 10 cards deep.
For the Nexus of Fate?
He doesn't need to. It's the top one.
Why not? Why burden yourself with having to draw additional cards when you can just get on the first one? Let's do it again. It's going to be another copy of Gift of Paradise.
And I imagine he's just going to Azcanta here also.
Yep.
He does, however, need to play quickly. There's only 2 minutes left now.
He does find another copy of that Nexus of Fate. The big question now is how can he come up with a situation in which he's going to just dominate this game?
Yeah.
He needs a way to actually deal 20 damage or have Relax lose. I don't know. The time's ticking. And we are seeing him really try and work through these motions pretty quickly. You know, he's been playing solid, and he's hit kind of a level in this to where so many of his interactions are relatively the same each turn. I'm going to activate this. I'm going to find I'm going to find a Nexus of Fate. If I have one, I'm going to put that in my hand, first things first, and then I'm going to untap, and I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to keep doing this, and I'm going to keep plussing Teferi until I can find a way to win the game.
And eventually he'll find a way to win the game.
Yeah. I wonder if, you know, maybe he's got the Nezahal and we just haven't seen it yet, and it's just in there secretly.
Oh, I think in this matchup, you're expecting them to sideboard out the Unlicensed Integrations. You usually bring in Lyra, right?
Okay. Lyra Dawnbringer could get the job done. Even a Manglehorn can attack 10 times if you've got enough turns.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got that Teferi and it's working in overdrive, he's got those Charter Courses, he's got this amazing amount of card draw. He can eliminate all the creatures from the board. He could try and get it done with a Manglehorn. Does a little bit of the work itself. We're seeing him fire down another copy of Nexus of Fate. I wonder if he's going to continue trying to get as much value or if he's just going to keep trying to move into the other turn to find more options that are actually able to turn sideways. He's got all these activations to go through. At another activation of that Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. You're seeing him in just hyperdrive right now.
Yeah, yeah. Just drawing cards. And see, what's crazy here is that Eric right now is just in a race against the clock.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're watching. If
or he's along for the ride.
Yeah, Ari's along for the ride, but there is basically, given enough time, there's no way that, yeah, there's no way that Ari could win the game. So.
We're going to fire it down again, go for another copy of Nexus of Fate. That cost of shuffling is unfortunately punishing right now.
Yes.
When seconds matter, you know. Firing down another one. We've got a land drop for the turn. We've got plenty of Haze of Fallen. We've got plenty of Cyclers. We've got this Teferi up to 7 counters now, and I think you see it as well as I do. There is still another copy of that Nexus of Fate, so we're going to be firing that one down as well. Backup copies of Teferi in hand if he ever needs them. There's the Manglehorn coming down. Take down the Thopter. Are you ready to see the Manglehorn swings?
Yeah, I think we're at 0 time, though. This may be down to turns.
Yeah, it might be too far gone. We see those players. They are preparing for the end of the match. Hard to quite tell exactly what that was. It might have been just an accept that that they couldn't get the draw. Also potential that it was Arilax just accepting the inevitable. But wow, what a showcasing of what this Nexus of Fate deck can do. At the end there, the engine that was online, the chance of missing was basically 0 when you're looking at 10 cards a turn.
Yeah, I mean, he was looking at 10 cards a turn. He had 4 copies of the card in his deck. He was casting multiple copies of Nexus of Fate per turn. It's just absurd. Very fun to watch.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this match. Of course, we are going to have more Magic for you. Stick around. We'll be right back after this. Angeles. I mean, I'm feeling like after that one, I could use a little bit more magic. So let's head on down. Let's see some time walk, and let's watch more matches here in round 5. Going to be Sam Black on this black-red aggro deck up against Živko Nedelchev.
I like that Sam has the oldest Pretty Mountains, the beta Pretty Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
I guess not quite the oldest, but close to it.
Almost
Whereas,
oldest.
yeah, Živko has the newest Pretty Mountains.
Ooh, it's the old guard up against the new hotness. We've got a Braid taking down a Boma Courier, Akari, Zev. Black-red aggro here. Give me the quick breakdown. What's it come down to?
So I think some of the most important cards in this matchup are Hazaret and Rekindling Phoenix. I think that the ability to just land a Phoenix on turn 4 puts you at a massive advantage to win the game.
We see Unlicensed Disintegration, no artifacts around, just trying to clear that one off the board, and we're going to get the attack on in for 3. Sam Black at 19. Živko down to 17. 4 mana, and what's going to be 4 mana has been just such a contentious place for this deck. Between Chandras, between Rekindling Phoenixes, between Hazarets, that balance between these cards for any of these has been a really kind of hotly contested as far as what decks that you really want to have in the main deck, and how you want to either save slots from the sideboard, maybe not have to run any of them, balance that out. That's a rough spot to be in.
Yeah, and here Živko actually choosing to play Soulscar Mage and Goblin Chain Whirler instead of landing a Phoenix there.
And the way that goes is you can see right now that Karizev has got a counter on it. That's actually a -1/-1 counter. That Soulscar Mage, it does have that ability. If non-combat damage would be dealt to creatures your opponents control, it's dealt in -1/-1 counters instead. Then that Goblin Chain Whirler comes down to the battlefield, deals that 1 damage. Now it's just a 0/2. So we've got that Rekindling Phoenix back up top after we see it block the Goblin Chain Whirler. It's going to be another copy of Rekindling Phoenix. What a way to kick things off, taking to the skies. 3 of them on the battlefield, and they are all looking powerful.
And, I just said a second ago how that's one of the best cards in the matchup, how that's a lot of, when I've played game 1s in this mirror, Rekindling Phoenix has really been the most important card, and yeah, here's a whole pile of Rekindling Phoenix.
So there is 5 open mana attacking in with both the Goblin Chain Whirler and the Rekindling Phoenix. Sam Black has got a decision to make. He could potentially block with the Karizev, which has lost quite a bit of its value. He could also block with both of these Rekindling Phoenixes, thinking, what are the odds that that Živko has got enough removal to eliminate both of the eggs?
Yeah, so before when he made the block, getting the egg, it was pretty safe because there was no possibility of a post-combat Chain Whirler. But now that there is a possibility of a post-combat Chain Whirler, things get quite a bit more dangerous.
And look at that. That looks like 3 mana to me, but it's going to be Unlicensed Disintegration that eliminates it. Sam Black actually also holding his own copy, so it is unlikely that Živko will be untapping with that egg.
Yeah, now, Sam having the Phoenix advantage here puts him in a really nice position to win this game.
Yep, 4 power in the air as opposed to 4 power on the ground. This Karizev is, I guess, more of a ceremonial guard, but it's going to throw down Ragavan. It's not going to be dealing a whole lot of damage itself, but gets a little bit of that in there. And it's just going to be a hit for 6, not willing to throw that Soulscar Mage in front of it. We do see a cycle of a Canyon Slew, trying to draw a card, see what the options are before we end up making that decision whether or not to block. And whatever it is that Živko saw, it was enough to not throw away the Soulscar Mage. Rekindling Phoenix, 4 of them down. We keep thinking that they're going to be gone, but due to their name, due to their nature, they just keep on coming back.
Repeatedly reborn of the flames.
I'm a big fan of the red ones. Phoenixes, they're just perfect.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
They're some of my favorite cards ever.
Yeah,
Phoenixes.
And the art on this card,
It's gorgeous.
The Owl Phoenix.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm waiting a long time. Who would have thought?
Is that an owl joke?
Yeah.
Nice. So it's Rekindling Phoenix against Rekindling Phoenix. That advantage now lost, though Sam Black holding on to a Glorybringer. In hand, that's going to be the flying 4/4 that when it attacks, it can exert. It can start throwing down 4 damage as it chooses. Might be pointing it at that one, as long as it's not a dragon, I suppose. A lot of loyalty in that Glorybringer.
Yeah, and Glorybringer, it matches up really poorly against Rekindling Phoenix. So Sam here, he's going to have to, come up with a way to get that Phoenix off the table over the course of probably a pair of turns if he wants to, really do what he needs to do.
5 mana, it's the Glorybringer coming down to the battlefield. We are going to turn the bull sideways. We are going to exert. That's going to eliminate that Phoenix. We're going to go ahead and grab this. It's elemental, I believe, but basically it's called the egg because at the beginning of your upkeep, you swap that out for a Rekindling Phoenix that is in your graveyard, which is why we now see it return to the battlefield. Big swing in. Jivko is down to 3.
So I didn't really see this line that well previous, but I love this from Sam Black. By making this play, he puts Jivko down to 3. Sam has Unlicensed Disintegration in hand, so now if he's able to draw a Bomat Courier or a Scrap Heap Scrounger off the top of his library, he'll just win the game on the spot against an opponent that does not have access to any life gain. And he puts his opponent in a position where they want to be blocking instead of attacking. And this matchup is all about establishing yourself as the aggressor. So a line that I was wary of that Sam Black was keen on making here, and it worked out well for him.
Looks like there is also a Goblin Chain Whirler in hand. That's going to be able to deal a little bit of damage. It's On-Crop Crasher coming on down. We saw this card take a pretty steep rise over Pia Nalar relatively recently. It was really popular back. It became Pia Nalar as these got a bit more mid-rangey. We've seen it increase since then. It's been, that 3-drop slot has been one that really keeps shifting between the two. But it's got haste. It can swing in for 3, and it's going to do just that.
And yeah, On-Crop Crasher, a card that is usually sideboarded out for games 2 and 3 in this matchup. But a card that really shines against decks like Stompy.
Anything that's just got bigger creatures than you. If they can throw down a Steel Leaf Champion and you can follow it up with some way to prevent that one from blocking, get your Bomat Courier, your Karizev, and that Crasher through. And that is going to take it down. It's going to be Sam Black taking away the win there pretty happily, and it's going to be up against the Soulscar Mage from Jivko. Just a tapped Canyon Slew there for Sam Black, followed up by a Canyon Slew on Jivko's side. Just 1 mana for the turn. It's going to be a pass back.
And now sideboarding in this matchup, both players likely taking out their Bomat Couriers. It's a card that's very weak to Goblin Chain Whirler. Both players taking out their On-Crop Crashers. Traditionally, the school of thought is that Pia Nalar would be the next card to come out if you had more cards you wanted to bring in out of the board. But yeah, the main cards they want to be taking out and replacing would be the Bomat Couriers and the On-Crop Crashers, usually getting replaced with some number of Chandra's Defeat and Glorybringers. I believe people have also been bringing in Chandra when on the play, but not on the draw in this matchup. Seems to be the professional consensus as of right now.
For Sam Black, he's also got a couple copies of Karn, Sign of Urza, as well as 2 copies of Doomfall. Are these cards that you also like? Well, it looks like Sam Black does like Doomfall, using that one to eliminate the Soulscar Mage. But how do you feel about Karn, Sign of Urza in a matchup like this?
So I've not played with those cards out of Black-Red. So I wouldn't really know. Sam has a really unique way of building his sideboards and building his decks for particular events, and he's usually right. That's the thing, is that he's somebody who has over the years really proven himself to be one of the best deck builders in the world. So I'm definitely not going to fault him for it. And it seems like an excellent answer to Phoenix right here. We talked about how Phoenix is one of the best cards in the matchup, and exiling that seems like a good plan.
We've seen 2 Doomfalls from Sam Black, and he looks so content with the way that this game has gone so far. No pressure on the battlefield, and he's going to just immediately go for a Chandra Torch of Defiance, making sure that that one resolves, a Scrap Heap Scrounger to follow it up, and what a way to find himself into this matchup. Though, Chandra's Defeat, very flavorfully going to take down Chandra. Jivko likes the hand well enough not to discard a card, though.
Yeah, so that Chandra's Defeat really just being incredible there for Jivko. He gets to spend 1 mana to deal with a 4-mana play from Sam Black.
I mean, basically it was a 4-mana Scrap Heap Scrounger and discard a card. So we've got 5 mana. It's going to be Glorybringer coming on down. This is going to be the 4/4 in the skies. We are going to exert this one. Eliminate it while we can. Sam Black does not have any mana to be able to rebuild that aggression. Also, no other creatures in the graveyard.
Yeah, and it's also just usually worth exerting right away to guarantee that you're getting some amount of value out of your Glorybringer.
Looks like Sam Black has got a copy of his own. This one not exerting. It cannot hit dragons.
Yes.
A lot of kinship.
Very important thing to remember when you watch the dragons fly at each other through the sky.
Haven't seen a dragon storm like this in quite a while. PNLR comes down. It's a Thopter on the battlefield. 2 of those creatures, and it's going to be Unlicensed Disintegration. We now do have the artifact because of that Thopter from PNLR, and it's going to be a pass back to Sam Black, and his board struggling at this point. Jivko has really established himself.
Yeah, and Sam has the tools he needs to get back into this game right now. He has a Chandra's Defeat to deal with the Glorybringer, and he has a Magma Spray to deal with that PNLR, and then he'll be left with an Abrade, and he'll be slightly ahead on the board. So a really close one here.
Jivko is going to draw the card for the turn. We're seeing some patience from Sam Black as of yet. I suppose he's probably got to fire off the Chandra's Defeat prior to combat, though. Like, you don't want it exerting, do you?
Oh, definitely not. Yeah, he's definitely going to fire off that Chandra's Defeat at the beginning of combat.
So we see the 6 mana available for Jivko, considering the lines available. Do we want to do anything pre-combat? Do we want to... I'm not certain quite what the options are in hand, but if it is anything like a removal spell, maybe debating if you want to clear the way for the PNLR or the Thopter to attack. It is going to be 2 mana, and Abrade takes down the Thopter in the sky. That means that the way is clear for this Glorybringer, and it looks like pre-combat. Like you said, Chandra's Defeat eliminates it. 2 removal spells in hand. We've seen 2 Chandra's Defeats, and neither one of these players wanting to rummage. That ability is a lot worse when your hand's great.
Yeah.
It's an attack in for 1. It's a Magma Spray taking it down. Nothing great for Jivko that turn. He really wanted to get in some damage, really wanted to put on the pressure, wanted to be the aggressor, and it just didn't happen. Offering up the trade, and it's not going to get taken. Passing it back. Offering up the PNLR fight.
Yeah, I'm actually somewhat surprised Sam offered that up. I mean, he had the Abrade. He could have just burned it out of the way and then attack. But Sam, instead deciding that keeping the double Abrade in his hand to deal with something like Rekindling Phoenix or Glorybringer is too important.
It's not going to be that good against Angrath the Flame Chain, though.
No. Angrath the Flame Chain is a nice one.
Oh, no. This is... those Abrades look a lot worse suddenly to me. So Angrath, Flame Chained, 5 mana, Planeswalker, 4 loyalty. We see it up to 5. It's got that possibility each opponent discards a card and loses 2 life. And Abrade goes away, eliminates the PNLR. Has a -3 to gain control of a creature until end of turn. You untap it and give it haste, the usual act of treason, and then you sacrifice it at the end step if the CMC is 3 or less. Eventually, you also have this -8. Each opponent loses life equal to the number of cards in their graveyard, and with that possibility having them discard throughout the game. But that possibility, Sam Black has to discard a card, loses 2 life. That is a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that because Sam has this Scrap Heap Scrounger that he was able to reanimate on Jivko's end step, that he's able to get this Angrath off the table if he wants to here, barring Jivko having something like a Magma Spray as his last card.
Mm-hmm. Which having would be amazing. But does Sam Black really have a whole lot of options? Can he leave this Angrath on the battlefield? Is this something that he can afford to ignore?
Yeah, I like this a lot.
Okay, so what we saw there was the Scrap Heap Scrounger attacking the Angrath. You would think that's only 3 damage for that 5 loyalty, but 4 mana tapped on Sam Black's side, and the reason for that, PNLR does have that ability, pay a red and a colorless to give it +1/+0, made it a 5 power attacker, eliminated the Angrath, and was able to keep up the pressure on Jivko.
Yeah. So here, another 3 pumps here, now on the Scrap Heap Scrounger. It's going to become a 6 power creature. It's an attack for 8.
Big swings coming in, and only Akari Zev to try and stand in the way of it. Oh, and a Chandra is the draw. Minus that, eliminate that. That is 5 power on the board, and that is going to be Sam Black cleaning up the black-red mirror in 2 games. There was a little bit of a point where I was curious about it. You seem to be confident the whole time. You know, on the right side of the battlefield, there was a lot of creatures. There was the Glory Bringer. There's the PNLR, the Thopter, and you thought, nah, he's got the tools. He can handle this one. Sam Black obviously shows that that you and he were looking at the same toolbox and comes away with the win.
Yeah, I really like Sam's plan there. I haven't seen much in the way of Doomfalls for the black-red mirrors. It seemed like a really good answer to that Rekindling Phoenix. That's definitely one of the most important cards in that matchup, and being able to win that war seems really important. Angrath, a card that can be very exciting in a lot of different matchups. I'm not sure if that's a card I'm necessarily bringing in for that matchup, though the thought of stealing my opponent's Glorybringer and exerting it does sound very nice. The major problem with that, though, is that I'm conceiving a situation in which my opponent has already cast a Glorybringer and successfully exerted it against me, which means I could be in a pretty bad spot.
All right, well, it looks like we might have just a little bit more Magic available for us here in round 5. Let's head on down to it. It is going to be game 2 here. Alexander Hayne up against Rob Pisano, and it looks like Alexander Hayne is on Esper Control up against Black-Red Aggro, the deck of the day, the deck of the format. This Esper Control deck, how are you feeling about its odds in the hands of Alexander Hayne? He took away game 1. We're now into a post-sideboarded match.
Well, if he's drawing hands like this, then I like it quite a bit. This hand has a ton of versatile answers, which he can use to deal with whatever threats the Black-Red Aggro deck draws here. He doesn't have the engine that he needs. He needs something like a Glimmer of Genius, something like a Search Razkanta, or some type of Planeswalker to really get himself a foothold to gain an advantage in the long term. But he has all the tools he needs to survive in the early game, and usually when you're able to do that, your late game is so much more powerful than the other decks. You have things like Torrential Gearhulk, you have Teferi, you have Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. So as long as you have those early game tools, I feel like you should like your spot in a matchup like this.
And we've got enough that we're willing to cycle this Fetid Pools. It's 2 mana, put it in the graveyard, draw a card. Doomfall comes down. Let's take a look at the hand. We see Glorybringer, Abrade, Chandra, Rekindling Phoenix. That's a lot of expensive but very powerful spells.
Yeah, now, Rob Pisano, only 3 lands on the battlefield. So he's not casting more than 1 spell a turn basically forever. And Alexander Hayne, we saw his hand. His hand is really good at winning a 1-for-1 fight. So Alex can't be too upset by this. The one thing that he may be a bit frustrated by is the fact that Rob's going to be casting this Phoenix first if he draws a land here.
He does not. He draws a Doomfall, and we're able to take a look at, and this is a card that we've seen recently really popular. Even on Twitter, we saw a lot of players looking for it. Infernal Reckoning. Out of this one, a little bit of new tech. We saw it in Wafatapa's deck last weekend. How do you feel about that card as a potential answer to things like Scrap Heap Scrounger, 2 Heart of Kirin, anything else like that?
Well, Wafotapa is better at building and playing control decks than anybody else who has ever lived. So the fact that he put it in his deck means that it is now just canon. That's my opinion.
So it was played, so it shall be done.
Yes.
All right, Kari Zev going to get beat by a Fatal Push, and we have got this Rekindling Phoenix continuing to swing on in. It's going to take an exile removal spell or 2 of them, though most of what Alexander Hayne has got to bring is going to be exile. He's got access to both Doomfall and Vraska's Contempt. Firing down that Glimmer of Genius, you mentioned earlier that he was really going to be looking for a way to get back to plus cards in hand more than that 1-for-1. and the mana has not been a problem. He's got to search for his content now. His card quality is going to be through the roof. Rob Pisano has got to be... He's been able to take this Rekindling Phoenix really far. He's got to be wondering how much farther it can go. Syncopate is going to come down for 3 mana, means that Rob Pisano's got to pay an additional 2 mana. Cannot pay that cost. Alexander Hayne down to 8. Needs to find an answer to this Rekindling Phoenix shortly, or else it will be done, though. Plenty of those tools do exist in the deck, and now with a transformed Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin, the odds are just going up. It's going to be Torrential Gearhulk into Vraska's Contempt. Going for it during the main phase. How do you feel about that?
I'm not really sure what the argument is for doing it then, as opposed to
is this because we've seen plays before where someone will maybe abrade their own Rekindling Phoenix in response to a card like that to be able to get it back?
Yeah, that's exactly why he did it. Yeah.
All right, and it looks like this game is closing on up. As it happens, this is going to end up being a win for Alexander Hayne. He was able to turn around, and it looks like that Torrential Gearhulk was able to take him all the way to the finish. What a round. Round 5 is great.
Yeah, man, that was a very good round. We had a lot of Magic to watch.
And we were able to see that Turbo Fog deck really do what it was designed to do. We saw it take an enormous amount of turns early on, really put on a show of what that deck is capable of.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Froelich did everything anybody ever wants to do in a game of Magic. You know, he casts 25 time walks over the course of a match. He drew like 700 extra cards. It's just a joy to watch.
All right, well, with that, that is going to bring us to the end of this round 5. There's more Magic to be had next round in 6. We'll see you there.